Welcome to the Healing Place podcast, a space filled with inspirational stories of hope, along with practical advice for your healing journey. Your host is Teri Wellbrock, trauma warrior, writer, speaker, blogger, therapy dog handler, and founder of the Sammy's Bundles of Hope project. As a survivor and a thriver, Teri's mission is to shine the light of hope into the world by interviewing insightful guests from across the globe. Please stay tuned at the end of today's interview as we honor our sponsors. The Healing Place podcast is a fiscally sponsored project of Fractured Atlas. Now, here's your host and trauma warrior, Teri Wellbrock.
Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock, and very excited to have with me today Stefanie Stahl. And Stefanie is an author, podcaster, psychotherapist, and her book that has just been released in December in the US and the States, The Child in You, The Breakthrough Method for Bringing Out Your Authentic Self, has sold 1.6 million copies in Germany. And it's been translated into 30 languages, #1 bestseller of nonfiction for the past 4 years. I'm so excited. So welcome, Stefanie.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I said I went to your website, which I went to the German one, and Google was able to translate it in English. And so I was able to read about you and all that you're doing in the world. And first, I just want to say thank you for the beautiful work you're doing and the light you're shining into the world.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. But we also set up an English website for the US market, stefaniestahl.com.
So yeah, I want to do a share. Let's talk a little bit about the book right away. I'll pull up the share screen here. So yeah, let's talk about this book and what it's about.
Well, it's about the inner child. And I know that the inner child is an old hat, not only in the US, but also in Germany. But I invented, through my work as a psychotherapist, a very, very new approach. And a very own approach, it's really new. And yes, and I know why this book is so successful. It is because it really helps people to do their own psychotherapy with themselves. They don't need a psychotherapist, at least not what I call in German always the normally disturbed, not deeply traumatic diseases, but the average neurotic like you and me. They can do a lot of self-help with this book because the method I invented through my work as a psychotherapist is very, very pragmatic and hands-on.
Yes, beautiful. Well, one of the reviews I had read on your book stated that this book is so wonderful because it's like carrying a psychotherapist in your pocket with you. Yeah.
That was actually my intention. And as many millions of people tell me, it works. Yes, it works. Because I give the people, the central theme at hand, because on the surface, when we look on our issues, psychological issues, many things seem to be so very, very complicated. We are enmeshed in a very, very difficult relationship, or we're suffering from panic attacks. And we know, of course, that our anxiety is very exaggerated, but we have no idea to stop it. Or we're suffering from depression, although we know we are quite well off, but still we feel so burned out and everything. So it seems often to be so complicated, but in the end, everything comes down to very, very simple psychological structures. And that is the aim of my whole work, to make these psychological structures very, very visible to everybody. So you can say, oh, it's only that. Okay, that is quite easy to change, Yes.
Yes. So are you talking about changing habitual patterns, changing habits? And I know myself, I've done a lot of research in adverse childhood experiences and the ACEs field and the impact of my own personal ACEs, but these experiences on my trauma story and my panic attacks. I had panic attacks for 25 years until I did that healing work and went back and healed that child.
Mm. Well, my book is even more not also about changing behaviors, of course, but in the first point, it's more about changing your inner attitudes and changing your inner belief system, because your self-image is determining the outlook into the world. You know, it's so important. The way you think about yourself determines what you think about other people, what they think about you. You know, that is this projection. If you have a deep-rooted belief that you're not enough, you think and project into other people's head that they think that you are not enough. And then you invent unknowingly, often you adapt them in your childhood, self-protection strategies, you know, to compensate this inferiority feeling within you. Like for example, a very, very common self-protection strategy is perfectionism, you know, or keeping the peace, you know, or striving for power and so on. And I put all these things, the beliefs, the feelings, the self-protection strategies into one model, into the model of the shadow child.
Yeah.
The shadow child stands for our injuries that we gained in the childhood, and the sun child is the solution. The sun side stands for the solution and for the good things we received from our parents, but most importantly, all the things we can change now in our adult life, because we are no longer at the mercy of our parents, you know. But I don't want to be misunderstood. My approach is not about to blame our parents, but I say you have to know and you have to understand what imprints you received or developed in your childhood, because these imprints in your brain, you know, these mental patterns are the lenses you look through at the world.
Yeah, I love the idea of befriending your inner child, which is something I had read of yours. And um, yeah, it's so much of trauma recovery, particularly trauma, is about befriending fears, befriending what has happened, befriending. But I love the idea of befriending that inner child, that child. Now, the shadow child, is that what a lot of people start with, and the goal is to then move to become a sun child?
Yes, also it's you know, it's like in medicine, the diagnosis comes before the treatment. So you can say the shadow child is somehow the diagnosis. Yeah, and I invented this simple method how you can get to know your shadow child. As you see on the pictures, you note down how mommy and daddy treated you. And because I have to first, maybe I have to explain that the first living years are very, very important, because when we are born, our brain is only to 25% developed. And that is all about very basic functions, like the regulation of hunger and satiety, or heat and cold. And all higher brain functions, all higher cognitive functions are developed, most of them in the first living years. So all the synapses get connected and hardwired within this time. So how mommy and daddy are treating you imprints your brain. And these imprints you carry over into your adult life as unconscious mental patterns. And the most important thing is the question how your self-esteem is formed. What do you think what you are worth? And that you learn from mommy and daddy, yeah, what you are worth, and moreover, over what you have to do to be loved. And with these patterns that are deeply imprinted in your brain. You grow up and carrying them over as social patterns, as psychological patterns, as behavioral patterns, and they're most important. These are the glasses you look through at the world, these patterns, these imprints. And the shadow child stands for the more problematic imprints, yes, for the things which didn't went so well in our upbringing, and everybody has at least a little shadow child within himself, because there is no such a thing like perfect parents or perfect childhood. And the sun child stands for the things mommy and daddy did well, and what was nice, and very important, what you can change now in your adult life. And then the third very important thing is the adult self, the inner adult, because the inner adult stands for your clear thinking, for your reason, for your clear thinking. And the inner adult is very, very helpful to separate the shadow child from the inner adult, and the shadow child from the sun child. Because when you don't reflect on all these issues, they always intermingle, and they get confused. Yes, for example, you're not aware of your shadow child, and you're invited to a party, and you have a shaky self-esteem, and you go to the party. First of all, you think whether you should go at all to the party, because there are many people who you don't know, and maybe you just can't connect to anybody, and you look stupid and whatever. So maybe the first thing you have to think about, well, shall I accept the invitation? Shall I really attend this party? And then you go to the party, and then you maybe worry about your impression you make on the party, how people look at you. And if you don't know that all the time your shadow child is acting, yes, and thinking and feeling, you really believe what you think and what you feel. You really believe, in this case, I'm not enough, I'm not as good and as beautiful as the other people here. You really feel inferior, and you think you're right. But as soon as you start the work with the inner child and the shadow child, you are more able to separate this. So you are on the party, and your adult self knows now, okay, all the things, all these feelings of insecurity come from mommy and daddy, and he can start to talk to the shadow child and tell him maybe, oh, my little sweetie, come on, you don't need to feel so insecure. We know that you're a shining star from day one. And that comes all from mommy and daddy, because they were sometimes overwhelmed and stressed out. So you developed these nasty little beliefs like, I'm not enough, I'm a burden, and so on. But we know these beliefs actually belong to our parents and not to us, because they only and nothing but only show how overwhelmed mommy and daddy were, and they say nothing, absolutely nothing about your own worth. And that is a way of the separation. You are not anymore so closely identified to your inner belief systems and to these negative emotions that they evolve.
Yeah. Wow. That was powerful. It teared me up just for a second, because I've done a lot of healing work with my parents from my own journey, but really had never thought of it as in that perspective, that it was mom and dad being so overwhelmed. I mean, I know that they had their own trauma history that they had to work through, but very powerful. Yeah. Wonderful.
Yes. And that is almost my most important message. Because in the end, it is so unbelievably easy. Our mind is so highly subjectively imprinted, yes? If mommy and daddy weren't so overwhelmed or not so stressed out, if they would have been very, very lovable and very, very capable to attach and to bond, my inner belief system would be completely different. So it's completely arbitrary, you know? It's arbitrary, you know? And so that is, one has to make himself really, really clear, because we automatically, we take these beliefs on our side, but they don't belong to us. They are just, they just witness how our parents behave toward us.
Right. Well, it's really putting the brakes on generational trauma, that cycle of trauma. This healing work that you offer to people is helping them to say, it stops here. I'm not going to pass this along to my children.
Yes, that is another very important point, because if you don't reflect on these old programs and psychological patterns, you're really running the risk to pass them along to your children. And there are several options. One option is you just act like mommy and daddy, like your own parents,
Right.
or slightly better. You're the 2-point version of your own parents, yes?
Yes.
And you think, because of your own upbringing, you think now you're a good mother because you really make it better than your own mother. But you don't realize that it's still far under the necessities what children needs, you know? But you think, oh, I'm much better than my mother or than my father. On the other hand, you can also overcompensate what your experience was as a child. So maybe your parents were not very lovable and they didn't care very much, that you start to overprotect your own children, because you overcompensate what you suffered from. And so you push too strong to the in the other direction. And that is why I say it's so very important that everybody reflects himself and reflects what patterns and what programs he developed during childhood, because that is the only means to free yourself. And not only in terms what it means for your own children, but also to lead a better life and to become a nicer person.
Yes.
Because when you have the feeling you're not enough and you develop some self-protection strategies, these can be a burden for society or other people. For example, if you have the self-protection strategy that you're struggling for power all the time, you know, and you have, maybe you are in a very good position in your job or even politically, you know, you have a big power. And if you have this very strong power motive, you know, you can really be a burden for society. So it's not only about to become a happier person, but it's also to become a better person. The more you reflect on yourself, the wiser you can act towards other people.
Yes. Well, and I love the idea. I mean, what an impact we have on the world, those around us, our family, but really everybody when we do that healing work. And I have a beautiful story to share really quick, in that my mom is 85 years old and she's celebrating 1 year and 6 months sober. She stopped drinking at 83. But she started
cool.
to do that inner child healing work. And so she started at 83 years old. But as a result of her doing the healing work and finally going back and looking at what had happened to her traumatically as a child, and it was really horrific trauma that she had always covered and survived with alcohol. I mean, she used alcohol as her coping skill, unhealthily. And so now her doing her healing work has had such a profound impact on our relationship as mother and daughter, and my healing journey as well.
Huh?
Pardon me?
Then she could apologize, and that is such a big thing in healing your inner wounds. If if you have the, if you can make the experience that your parents apologize, that is
Yes.
really, really so soothing, and it really cures a lot of your inner wounds.
She did. And it was the first time that I had ever heard my mom. I mean, she looked me in the eye and said, I am so sorry for, and then we
Mhm.
talked about it. And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful healing journey for the two of us because of the work she's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what she actually did is she took her responsibility, and that is was what is so often intermingled or enmeshed between children and parents. When you're little, and your parents behave inappropriately towards you. Yes, they don't fulfill your needs of attachment or your needs of autonomy, so you often come up short, and you often don't get the feeling that your parents are really aware of you. As a little child, you never think mommy and daddy should go to psychotherapy or need some counseling. You always think as a little child, I'm bad, I'm not enough, I'm the one who's wrong, I'm a burden. So that is how these beliefs come about. And so you take it on your side, and you start taking the responsibility that you get along with mommy and daddy, which is actually the parents' job, to behave in a way towards their children that their children feel loved and welcome, and feel supported. But if the parents have two great shortcomings in all these things, then the child starts to take the responsibility that his relationship with its parents will work out. And that is the bottom and the ground and the hotbed for any psychological issue that you develop later in life.
Yes, most definitely. Wow, beautiful. Can you talk a little bit more about your model of the sun child and shadow child?
So I think the most important thing one has to learn, how his own shadow child is configured. So to get a feeling how mommy and dad have treated me, and it's not about to go through every situation again. Like uh, that is old school in psychotherapy. In former times, people thought we have to work out every, stressful situation I suffered with from my parents. We have to work it out and go over and over it again. But now, since the neuropsychology becomes more advanced and advanced, and we develop more and more medical methods, to look at the brain, we know now that the synapses, if you go through and through and through again traumatic events, the path in your brain becomes broader and broader. So what you actually need only to know is the central theme. Yes, the central theme. And if the central theme was, for example, my parents didn't have had enough time for me because, for example, both were working and there were more siblings. So I was often coming up to short, and that gave me the feeling and the beliefs that I'm not important, and then that I'm coming up to short, and finally that I'm not enough. Then this is my pattern, and this pattern radiates in every single situation in my adult life. That is my basic pattern, and that's all what you need to know. And if you're clear about that, you can start working with that. But first, before you know this basic pattern, for example, I'm not enough, and that often gives me feelings. Now I come to the feeling of inferiority and shame and guilt, or sadness, or that I feel injured because of my basic wound from my childhood, that I'm not enough and that I'm not important. I start to invent, and that is very important, most of them already in childhood, to invent self-protection strategies. And these self-protection strategies can be, first of all, repressing reality, um, projection and feeling like a victim. That is also very, very common. Or that you're yearning always for recognition, or that you always try to keep the peace, or that you're power hungry, or that you become a control freak, or aggression and attack, or you remain a child. These are all self-protection strategies. And finally, it's the self-protection strategy, or most of us have a full set of self-protection strategies with which we burden ourselves and our relationships. For example, if I'm striving for perfection and try to keep the peace, which are often very closely linked together, because at the end, my shadow child is over-adapted. You know, he developed the program from his childhood. If I want to get along with you, I have to fulfill your expectations. Yes, that is the basic belief people have who are over-adapted. And a very, very common behavior of over-adaptation is to strive for perfectionism and keeping the peace. So you always have your antennae outside, looking what are the demands and needs of other people, and you adapt to them. And just because your deepest fear is of being rejected. And so you live your life actually under the motive of avoidance. Yes, instead of approximation, avoidance. Yes, you want to avoid, and that is a central theme in your life. You want to avoid that anybody could hurt you or reject you. And with this behavior, seemingly you're a very, very nice person and very easygoing, you know, and you fit in every team, you know, you're such a nice and helpful girlfriend. Yeah, but the other person never knows where you're standing. And when you are hurt, and you are easily hurt because you have this big wound within your shadow child that you are not enough and that you are not important, so you're easily hurt and injured. And so, for example, a friend of yours is forgetting your birthday, and because of your shadow child wound, and you're deeply hurt because she has forgotten your birthday, you don't say, hey, why did you forget my birthday? Or you just think, you know, when you have a stable self-esteem, you think, what the hell, everybody can forget a birthday. You know, you're not so injured. But if you have this wounded shadow child with this shaky self-esteem and with this self-protection of perfectionism and keeping the peace, you maybe start to withdraw, you know, and build up inner walls. Not maybe because of only one birthday, but there, you know, you're easily hurt, and then the friend is maybe ignorant that you just bought a new dress, or she's ignorant that you know, you have the feeling she doesn't listen very, very carefully when you're talking about your relationship, and so on and so on. You're often easily hurt, and you start withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing. You build up walls, and eventually you cut the contact, but never say a word, an open word, you know, you hurt me, or did I get it right, or maybe I'm wrong. You know, you don't give the other person any opportunity or chance to talk about, to apologize, or whatever. You just go back, and eventually the relationship is finished, whether with a girlfriend or with a friend or whatever, you know. So short term, you're easy in a relationship with this self-protection, but in the long run, it's hard to build up with you a long-term relationship, because you're not able to manage any conflict. And instead of managing a conflict, which maybe only exists in your shadow child eyes, but without talking out loudly and say where you are and where you stand, the other person is helpless, and you start retreating and withdrawing, and and eventually it's over. We had in Germany, we had a saying long time ago: he went out for buying cigarettes and never came back, and until then never a hard word was spoken. That is this kind of separation. Always peace, everything is nice, but suddenly a break off, and you don't know why, what you did wrong. And if you're lucky, you get a long list, over the last 20 years, what you said and when wrong, and what you did when wrong, a very long list. And you say, why did you never say anything? Why did you never say anything? I could have changed so easily, but then it's too late because the feeling's already cold,
Right.
because these people who are always striving for harmony, they don't anger out, but the anger is inwardly in a form of cold anger. And this cold anger eats up your feelings, You're getting more and more angry, and your partner becomes more and more an enemy in your eyes, who's dominating and who's overbearing. Yeah, because this is your projection, because you adapt voluntarily always to his so-seemed needs, or what do you think what he's needing. You make yourself smaller and smaller, and the other person becomes bigger and bigger in your eyes, and is changing more and more to an enemy. But who can love an enemy? Nobody. So your feelings get cold, and you're withdrawing, and finally you break off.
Yeah.
So it's very important to have a look on on your own self-protection strategies, because at the end it's the self-protection strategies that burden so much our relationships, and it's all about relationship. Also issues like depression or panic attacks, everything in the end comes down to relationships. Panic attacks, for example, people who are suffering from panic attacks, their shadow child thinks and feels that it is not able to manage life alone. It has always the yearning that there could be somebody who take them at hand and lead them over the street, and help them to deal with their lives. They feel so much dependent on other people. They don't really feel fit and able to cope with life. And that's why they develop panic attacks. That the panic attacks is a little shadow child that doesn't feel capable to get along with life. So
Yeah. Now, does
very dependent.
Does your book guide? I know self-reflection can be very hard for some people, and so do you guide people along figuring out what the shadow child really, what it is?
No. It's very, very hands-on. I take the readers by the hand and say, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, to figure out what is your shadow child, and this is step 1, step 2, step 3, how to get out of it, how to develop your sun child. It's very, very pragmatic. I really take the readers by the hand and, like a close friend, and lead them through this process very pragmatically. And that is why that's the reason why the book is so helpful, because almost anybody can go through this process as long as he is inclined to take his responsibility, his own, that's what you have to do anyway. Also, when you have psychotherapy sessions, if I have clients who don't take their own responsibility, they come every session on time and they work with me and they have some very good insights, but they go out of the door and they just forget everything what we have been talking about. So this that you have to take your own responsibility is anyway a basic need if you want to change anything about yourself or in your life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a commitment to, yeah, yourself and change, right?
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, again, this has been wonderful. And if there's anything else you feel compelled to touch upon, feel free to do so.
Yeah, the sun child is actually target state, and that is a clear counterpart of the shadow child. So in the sun child, we are looking for your positive beliefs. That means that we transform your negative beliefs into positive beliefs. But the possible beliefs have to be realistic. You know, if you have the inner belief, I'm ugly, then a new belief, I'm beautiful, won't work, because you would say, oh, come on, that's
Right.
really bullshit. No. But if you say, I'm beautiful enough, you know, this little enough, that can be, yeah, okay, beautiful enough, okay, I can cope with that. That is okay. So the new beliefs have to be realistic, and they have to be also realistic in another way, because if you have a belief, I'm not enough, and you transform it to I'm the greatest, that won't work, because you're not the greatest. But I'm enough is okay, or I'm okay. Yes. So we transform new beliefs which the inner adult can easily grasp. So the inner adult at least confirms to this belief, say yes, that is much more realistic to my adult life. We look for the strengths and resources. We look for higher values, because higher values can really strengthen you. And we look for self-protection strategies, self-reflection strategies. So we come from self-protection to self-reflection strategies. And that is, for example, if you're over-adapted, that you learn first step to feel your feelings, because people who are over-adapted have difficulties to feel their feelings, because strong inner feelings can stand in your way while you want to adapt to other people. Because if you have a strong inner will, you know, you want to assert yourself, you know, you want to make this will come true. And that is of course very difficult if you want to adapt in the same time, because and that is the reason why children who learn this over adaptation learn unknowingly to suppress their feelings. The less feelings you have, the easier it is for you to agree with other people. Oh, you want to go to the cinema? Yeah, well, okay, let's go to the cinema. You know, I don't have a strong inner feeling to do something else. And that is what many people who are suffering from overaddiction, there are many outside, they often say, actually, I don't know myself what I want. And they have hard times to make decisions, because without an inner link to your feelings, it's hard to make a decision, because at the end, it's a feeling who says, yes, that feels good. We make that now, we make it. So the first self-reflection strategy for the sun child, for building up your sun child, is to get a good contact to your feeling, and then to set healthy boundaries, to learn to say yes when you mean yes, and to say no if you mean no, and so on. So we are working on the self-reflection strategies. And so the sun child is a completely new program, because it's always hard to give up something you believed all your life in, and to give up very familiar behavior if there's nothing new. So what are you if you're not your shadow child? You have to have an idea of your new healthy and appropriate identity. And one of my most basic exercises is, I have many exercises in the book, many exercises also how you can connect to your feelings closer, so that you don't only think the sun child, but that you feel your sun child. And I've also spoken meditations. No, not I. In this case, in English, it was this beautiful speaker I have. Her name is Teri, who spoke the shadow child meditation and the sun child meditation, which you can download on my homepage. So that you get this, that you can console your shadow child on a deep, deep level of this meditation, and that you can embrace your sun child with this meditation. So I do a lot of exercises that you really can install the new program into your feeling and into your behavior, and that you really can console and accept and comfort your little shadow child, which is really important. And to go into this deeper process. But at the end, I would love to share my Steffi Stahl mantra. And my Steffi Stahl mantra is catch yourself and switch. Catch yourself and switch. And it's so basic and it's so easy, but it's so helpful, because with this little exercise, many people arrive to really cure themselves only with this. And that goes like this. You are in your everyday life. Then you have to be aware. You have to be aware. That is very important. You have to be aware and catch yourself when you're on your shadow child mode, when you're channeling your shadow child. You have to recognize this. If you don't recognize it in the moment, then you are totally identified with your shadow child, and then you believe everything you think and feel. Then you think that is the truth. You think, yes, it's true, I'm inferior, and every other man in this room is more important and is better than me. Then you believe this old reality that actually belongs to your parents. But if you recognize in that moment and catch yourself, oh, I'm again on my shadow child mode, then you can switch to your adult self. That means to your clear thinking, to your reason, and then you step one step aside, and then you can see yourself from the outside, which is actually the core of self-reflection, is to step outside, to see yourself from the outside. And from the outside, with your inner adult, through the eyes of your inner adult, you can see, oh, it's again my little shadow child acting, that thinks now it would be inferior. But come on, little child, we are absolutely on eyes level with everybody here. We have achieved so many things already in life. We are absolutely okay, the new beliefs. Let's channel our sunshine, and then you can change, then you can regulate, then you have the possibility to regulate yourself and come again to your current reality. Because in your shadow child, you're stuck in the ancient reality of your childhood, in the previous reality of your childhood. So catch yourself and switch. It's this little exercise you can practice all day long, from the morning to the evening, just catch yourself and switch. The more often you catch yourself and switch to your adult I, or even to your sun child, the more rarely the shadow child shows itself, the more rarely it appears at all. Because what you are doing, that is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is, I hope I pronounce it okay.
Yes.
That you make new paths within your brain.
Yes.
You form your brain in a new way, and maybe first it's a little path, but the more often you exercise these new beliefs, this new behavior, this new view onto the word, the bigger and broader the path becomes, and eventually it becomes a big highway, you know, within your brain. So this is a very, very nice exercise which I can recommend everybody outside there.
I love it, and I'm going to utilize it. I do it now when I find myself catastrophic thinking. I can stop and pause and
Yeah.
switch
Very,
to
very
on.
important is that you catch yourself in a very early state.
Yeah.
Because when the feeling becomes too strong, it blocks all reason. It blocks the neocortex, you know, this feeling blocks the reason. Even with good feelings, everybody knows who has been in love, you know, infatuated, had a big crush, that also by enthusiastic feelings, reason can be totally blocked, you know. So every strong feeling blocks reason and clear thinking. So it's most important that you catch yourself in an early state. When you're already completely desperated or suffering from a panic attack, then the only thing that really helps is complete distraction. Distraction, just to come down. But the thing is, you have to prepare for situations. You know, when you know I'm going to on a party today, and probably there could come up a situation which could be difficult to manage for me, which could be, you know, where I could easily channel my shadow side, just prepare mentally in advance, you know, and then be aware. And when the first feelings of inferiority, of anger, of whatever are coming up, then catch yourself and switch.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you. So one last question is for the listeners. How do they get a hold of you? Where do they find you?
They find me on my homepage, stefaniestahl.com. There are all contact information. There's the concept, there are the meditations, there's a little video, and yes.
Okay, wonderful. And they can get a hold of the book
everywhere.
on your
The
website?
book is in bookstore or in Amazon or wherever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, it's just been a delight, and thank you for sharing your wisdom, and very excited to have you here today. So thank you.
Thank you, Teri, for having me. It was a pleasure to me too.
Absolutely. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening today to the Healing Place podcast with your host and trauma warrior, Teri Wellbrock. If you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about Teri, her mission, and the Hope for Healing journey, visit Teri's website at www.teriwellbrock.com. Thank you for liking, commenting, sharing, and offering your reviews on our YouTube channel, audio outlets, and Facebook page. And as Teri reminds us, until next time, remember, be gentle with yourself.